Sorry, could you start over?
What?
Say that again. You belong to?
I belonged to a Christmas club that was organized by Encyclopedia Britannica. It was around the world for Christmas, and every year we would get a volume describing Christmas in a different country. And in it, they had recipes from that country. They had how to make ornaments that were in that customarily for that country. It had, and would they always send an ornament that was indicative of that country as well. Well, I remember when most of the kids were really small and we had very little money, instead of hanging stockings, this year we got the book about the Netherlands where they put out their shoe for Santa Claus to fill. And I thought, oh, it won't cost as much money to fill a shoe as it does a stocking. So that began the tradition in our family of putting out your shoes for Christmas. Many years later, of course, we kept up that tradition. We always put our shoe out. After, Philip and Christina had just been married. This is the first year of their marriage. And they were living in an apartment in Antioch. And Christine had graduated from high school, and she was living in an apartment in Martinez on her own. And she had a boyfriend. I think Cheryl also lived with her. So living at home, there was only Andy, David, Elizabeth, Alice. Allison wasn't born yet. David, I think Julianne might have been still at home. There was about,
So this is like 1986, 1987?
What?
This is like 1986 or 1987?
I don't know. I can't even tell you my kids' ages.
Well, it's about there then.
Anyway, that year, Dad had a really hard time at work. They had a strike, and it was over a month long. And when you get behind financially, it's really hard to catch up. And then after the strike, we lived on. Phil worked 5 days a week and almost always 1 day overtime. And 6-day pay. We just barely squeaked by. We didn't have anything extra, but we just barely squeaked by. And that year after the strike, the company cut out all overtime for the rest of the year. And they cut their work day a week down to 4 days a week. Well, that year, we hardly had any money. That was the miracle year. I'm going to get different stories all mixed up here. Anyway, and that wasn't the year I'm talking about either. Anyway, as I'm worrying about it, I think to myself, I called my children always got at least 2 presents at Christmas time, and that's all they got. They got a present from Santa Claus, and they got a present from Mom and Dad. And any other presents had to come from each other. And that year, well, they also had the shoe. I didn't think that we had enough money to buy things for the shoe. So I called the kids together on one family home evening, and I told them that this year they weren't going to put their shoes out. Well, this got out to the other kids that were no longer living at home. And they, on their own, like Christine and, her boyfriend at the time was can't remember his name, but Park was his last name. She was the one that she went on her mission, engaged to, and he got married while she was gone. Anyway, they got together and decided the kids needed to have shoes. Well, without Christine knowing, Philip and Christina decided the same thing. And there was one other person. I can't remember. Anyway, Christmas Eve night, in the middle of the night, Christina and Philip ran into each other at the house trying to sneak in to Phil's shoes. I tell you, our kids had the best shoes that year than they ever had. But that was the year Philip and Christina also. Philip is just sort of a social conscious person, and they decided not to give each other presents. What they decided to do that year, have you heard this story? They
No.
decided that they were going to make lunches to give to the homeless. And so they made huge lunch bags and took over to San Francisco, to Skid Row, and tried to distribute all these lunch bags that they had made up. So they had a very hard time finding homeless people. But this is the kind of Christmas our kids grew up knowing, that you didn't have to. They were more interested in thinking what they were going to do to give other people for Christmas. Christmas morning was always, in my family and in the family that Phil and I created, Christmas morning it took forever. You know, with a lot of families, you open up your presents and Christmas is done. Well, it took forever to open the presents because with 7 kids when I was growing up, we opened our presents one at a time. The youngest person would pick a present, give it to whoever it's addressed to. They open it and everybody oohs and ahs. Then they choose the next present. So we open the presents one at a time. And it takes forever to get through. And everyone is all so excited. The months before Christmas is wonderful because you're not thinking about what do I want for Christmas. Of course, we did pore over the catalogs. That was where we did all of our shopping, was in the catalogs. The Sears Roebuck had the best Christmas catalog. And there was Penny's and Alden's and Spiegel's. These are all catalog companies. And we get these catalogs in about October, and we called them the wish books. And we'd pore over them, not just to decide what we wanted for Christmas, but we decided we were trying to figure out what would be the perfect gift for whatever I can afford for the family. So Christmas was always very special, and it was always more fun to see if you hit it right with somebody. So you saw them open your present, and you're more excited about them getting the present than you were about you yourself getting your present. And so I'm really quite proud of my kids for the way that they view Christmas and their attitude about it. Oh, I did go through one silly phase trying to bring Christ into Christmas a little bit more. There for a while when the kids were small, I tried to make Christmas a birthday party. There was a Christmas song came out that was called "The Birthday of a King." You probably have heard it. Da, 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 da. Oh well, I can't do it.
I've never heard that one though.
Can't sing anymore. Anyway, so I tried to bake a birthday cake for Christmas morning, and have the kids all sing it, but it sort of really fizzled out. The shoes lasted, but not the birthday of Christ, I'm afraid. Oh, another time that was really, really fun at Christmas time, when all the kids were at home, the older kids were in high school, Andy and David were, Julianne was, anyway, the kids were all at home, and they decided one family home evening to put on the Christmas pageant. And, oh, I know, Julianne was 8 years old, because I remember she wore her baptism dress in the pageant. She was Mary, and I forgot who Joseph and the rest of them were, but I do remember that Andy was the donkey because in the pageant, Julianne came in riding on Andy's back, and she had stuffed a doll up underneath her dress so she'd look pregnant. And then they got into the stable, and she turned around and dropped something, and all of a sudden she had a baby. She had the doll. And that was a lot of fun, watching the kids on their own reenact the story. It was a lot of fun having a lot of kids. A lot of times. It was a lot of work, and it was exhausting, and my kids were, well, I remember once thinking, I wonder if my kids will survive each other, let alone like each other when they grow up. But lo and behold, they seem to be each other's friends. They're best friends, like Andy and David. Oh, night and day. One was dark, and one, my David, who was my bald one, he was the only one that was blonde when he was born. I was a towhead when I was born, and all my brothers and sisters were very Scandinavian, very Danish. And David was my only baby because Phil is dark-haired. And so David was blonde and Andy was dark. They were very close in age, less than 2 years apart. And night and day, oh my word, it was amazing why they survived each other. Andy was always bigger, and he would get the best of all the fights because he would get David down and sit on him. And David couldn't do anything about it. But David used to win at least half the time because he grew fingernails. So when Andy's sitting on David used his fingernails. Once, when they were teenagers, we had to take Andy to the doctor, Dr. Williams. He was a family physician. And when he looked at Andy, he says, "Where did he get all these scars?" He was all scratched up on his arms. He almost called Child Protective Services because of the child abuse that was going on in our home. And they were all from David defending himself. And I didn't know how to tell the doctor, hey, he earned every one of those scars. Anyway, I digress. Anyway, Christmas is important. The end.